Warning: the following podcast might be too truthful for most liberals. Listener discretion is therefore advised.
Welcome to the Tea Party Power Hour. This is your host, Mark Galar. Today, my guest is Mr. Owen Strachan. He is the provost and research professor of theology at Grace Bible Theology Seminary and a senior fellow with the Family Research Council. He earned a PhD in theology from Trinity Evangelical Divinity School. He's the author of over 20 books, including Christianity and Wokeness. Owen lives with his family in Conway, Arkansas. His new book, The War on Men, is out today. So perfect timing for the interview. Owen, welcome to the show.
Thank you so much, Mark. Thanks a lot for having me.
Well, it's interesting. When I saw the title, The War on Men, I remembered that back in 2016, I had Suzanne Venker on the show. She's the niece of Phyllis Schlafly, and she had written a book by the same title. And I am embarrassed to admit this, but at the time, I kind of thought she was exaggerating. I thought, she said that basically society wanted to relegate men to a bunch of superfluous buffoons. And I don't think anyone was really listening back then when she and her aunt, Phyllis Schlafly, tried to put out this warning. But I can tell you something. People are listening now because we see it every single day. Every single day we see that men are being encouraged not to engage in what's called toxic masculinity, and men are being encouraged rather to switch genders. It's all weird, but I suspect I know what prompted you to write the book. But you tell me, what made you want to write this particular book right now?
Yeah, watching men crash and burn is what really motivated me to write The War on Men. And seeing how our culture not only pushes men's head into the water and holds it there, but when men cry out for help, whether they do so directly, which a lot of men do not do, or whether they do so indirectly, because men don't often like to share their emotions. It's not easy for a lot of men to do. And men, in fact, are wired to be less emotional in a certain form than women. But our culture, when men do cry out for help, still punishes men. And so you recognize that men are paying twice. They're paying on the way in and they're paying on the way out. And it's an evil setup. I'm not saying in this book, The War on Men, that men have no failings or stumblings or weaknesses or sins. I write as a Christian theologian and unapologetically so. What I am saying is that, yes, men have their own evils and demons to face down, but also nobody is helped by relegating men to the sideline. Nobody is helped when men go weak and passive and disappear. Everybody suffers. So this isn't a book, The War on Men, just for men. It's actually a book for women to read too, because women are the ones who suffer the most when men drop out.
As someone who has a PhD in theology, what do you believe God's intention was for man in terms of how men should conduct their lives?
What a great question. I think men are called to be strong. If you want one word that I think men are called to be by God himself, it's strong. To understand that, though, we need to know that we're not the strong one by nature. We like to think of ourselves as strong, but the Bible teaches us that we're actually weak. We're weak in our sin, and we're not the one who can make ourselves who we need to be. We need Christ. We need the gospel. We need the blood of Jesus to wash away our sin. And when that locks into place, when we have faith in Christ, that is when we're born again. That's when we gain a new nature. And that's when we can really rise and become the men we most need to be. So that's what makes my book different, honestly, than what you hear out there in the public square. There's some good voices out there who wouldn't agree with my Christian theology, but they say some true things. Jordan Peterson, Joe Rogan, Jocko Willink, Tucker Carlson, and others, they have their own particular perspective, including their own religion, some of them. And I don't know their heart, but I can say this. They're all saying some things that men need, for sure. But what men most need is grace. They need help. They need for God to pick them up and remake them and change them. We don't just need style tips, Mark. We don't just need, a better wellness plan. We don't just need ice baths. We don't just need to be a Spartan warrior in our mindset. We actually need help. We need encouragement. We need strengthening, and we need God.
As I was reading the book, I definitely feel it was important that you made the distinction that by strong men, you're not talking about some guy who's pushing around a steroid IV and bench presses 600 pounds. You're talking about men who receive their strength through God. And that's what you mean by a strong man. You're not pushing for some alpha male who, frankly, spends all his time flexing his muscles. It's a completely different type of strength
Yes.
that you talk about in the book.
Yeah, that's exactly right. I do think God wants men to be physically strong as much as we can, to be a provider and a protector of women and children. But I do not think that God is calling us to be the bench press champion, or else we're not going to make it into heaven. That is not what the Bible teaches. The Bible teaches that our strength is to be found in God. God is the one who makes us strong. And when God makes us strong by his grace, what ends up happening is a man becomes stronger and stronger in every area of his life. You're never weaker than when you're sinning. You're never weaker than when you're proud. You're never stronger, actually, than when you're humble. So what we need are strong men today, but not men who think of themselves as strong, men who actually know that they don't get it all right, men who can confess, you know what, I messed that up, men who can say to their wife, hey, I'm sorry about that, men who can say to their kids, you know what, daddy got that one wrong, forgive daddy. These kind of things. That's not an unbroken litany for us. But what I want men to understand is that the vision of strength out there on Instagram, where a lot of young men are, for example, today, where Andrew Tate's got a harem on his arm and he's got Bugattis in the garage, that's not actually masculine strength. He's an impressive guy in certain respects physically, kickboxing champ or whatever he is, but he's not strong in bedding all sorts of women. He's weak. You know what's strong? Committing to one woman, loving her for your life, working out sin with her, and trying to love her well. That's what God works in us to make us strong to do.
I've been married for 36 years, and I can tell you that that is 100% accurate. There are all these guys out there that think by having a harem and by being promiscuous that they are manly men. And it's like I told my son, who's now 32, real strong men, real men marry one woman that they fall in love with, and they stay with that woman their entire life. Those are the strong men. Those are the manly men. And I see, like you, Owen, the type of behavior that you're describing with this celebrity is, I see it as weakness. I see it as weakness. They're trying to fill some kind of a void that really, just like the people that, worship global warming and climate change, they're filling a void that should be filled with Christ, but they're filling it with sin. And that's what I think's happening.
No, I think you're exactly right. And boys want to be strong. Men are wired to want to be strong from God. Men on average have 2,000 to 3,000% more testosterone, if I could speak English, than women. Men on average have 50 to 60% more upper body strength than women. So there's an innate wiring from God, our creator. We are not evolved dust or evolved apes. We are created by God, men and women. There are only two sexes out there that God has made. And God actually wants us to have the instinct and desire as men to be strong. But here's the deal. There's all sorts of bad visions of strength. And there's only really, at the end of the day, one good vision of strength. And it's found in God, and it's connected to humility and self-control and discipline. Biblical strength is not going out and grabbing whatever you want. The Bible itself critiques that idea in the person, the real historical person of Samson in the Old Testament in Judges 13 to 16. Samson is a kind of, ancient Andrew Tate. He goes out and gets what he wants. He sees a beautiful woman. He goes out and practically grabs her. He disdains his calling from God in all sorts of ways and just lives however he wants to live. And then and now, a lot of boys and young men look at that and they think, wow, so strong. In actuality, that's not true strength, as you said. True strength is power under control. So maybe a man who's married to a woman maybe he could draw all sorts of women. Maybe he could romance lots of women. Maybe he's got game, as they say. But he's not actually showing strength when he goes out and tries to win the hearts of women who aren't his wife. He's showing true biblical strength, Christ-like strength, when he dies to his lust. He asks God for help to love one wife. It's not an easy thing to do as a sinner, and he depends on the Lord to do that. That's when God is making you strong, not your fleshly strength is acting out however you want.
I think it's important that in the book, I mean, you're not denying in any way the superior strength of men. And I think it actually brought back childhood memories when I read the part about you saying that, young boys are always looking for something to jump off of to see how high they can jump off something, or how fast they can make something go. And I immediately had all these images from my childhood flashing through my head of that was a game I used to play. What is the highest thing I can jump off of and not get hurt?
Yes.
And boys play that game. And in addition to that, trying to make things go faster. And back then, when we didn't wear helmets and elbow pads and knee pads, how many trash cans could I jump over with my bicycle on a ramp? Because those were the days in the 70s of Evel Knievel jumping over things with his motorcycles. So that was my childhood. And I remember thinking, yeah, it's important to recognize that boys and girls are different. I didn't see any girls in our neighborhood trying to see how many trash cans they could jump over, or if they could jump off the roof of their house and land safely. Those differences are there, and that's perfectly fine. When you talk about the need for strong men, again, you have a different definition of strength, but what the left, what the Marxists are trying to do, as I'm reading in your book, is they don't want there to be any differences between men and women. They want men to essentially be women, and you even made that reference in your book to grip strength going down. So maybe they're getting their wish, but you tell me, Owen, why is it important to Marxists to conduct this war on men that you describe in the book?
You put a lot on the table there. By the way, no, in a good way. I once took a straw, unscrewed the cap of hot pepper flakes at the pizza place in Maine where I was growing up. And for no good reason other than there was a pretty girl across the table, blew into the hot pepper flakes as strongly as I could to, air quotes, show off to her. I don't know what my full brain at age 13 was thinking, but there's a little bit of that restlessness, adventuresomeness, desire to show out and prove oneself and be cool, however you want to frame it. That's that testosterone coursing through a boy's blood that causes him to do some really dumb things, but also is part of what causes him to want to step up, to be heroic, to be courageous, to face down danger, to go to war when he needs to go to war, to stand down evil, to help the weak. All of that is not supposed to be eradicated. All of those instincts aren't supposed to be medicated into oblivion, as is happening with a ton of boys who, by the way, don't need medication, a lot of them. They need a dad. They need shepherding. They need a pastor. They need help. But we're in a context where the very nature of boys now crosses all the boundaries and trips all the wires. And so a lot of boys just don't fit. And this sets them up to be in a terrible situation where they need to be girls, basically. And so we want boys to be self-controlled. We want them to learn wisdom. We want them to learn discipline and patience and kindness and gentleness and all other such fruit of the Spirit, Galatians 5 in the New Testament. But we are never training boys into a wise and godly life by the grace of God, thinking that if they would just become a little girl, that would solve all our problems. And that's really what a woke, feminist, Marxist, and pagan vision. Those are different worldviews, but they really all combine to militate against the nature of boys. And the reason they do, Mark, is because they all spring from a common source. They all spring from the mind, not of God, but of the devil. The devil hates creation order. The devil hates manhood and hates womanhood. The devil hates godly manhood and godly womanhood, and he is trying to tear it down every chance he gets. And he will use many different systems to do that. You find that in Marx. Just one further comment here in this long answer. You find it in Marx. Marx in 1871, when he publishes the Communist Manifesto, he calls for nothing less than the abolition of the family. So Marx is known for his, air quotes, economic system that is no system at all. It's just destruction, left and right. It's not a system. But actually, Marx was equally concerned with tearing down the world God has made and in its goodness in terms of the natural family. And so we have to just say, look, there's no accommodating this. We're not merging wokeness with Christianity. We're not merging feminism with Christianity. We're not merging paganism with Christianity. We reject all of that. We're going to try to rescue people caught in those systems in love. And by God's grace, we're going to build strong homes, even as the culture opposes us.
So part of this is taking out the natural family. And another part of it that I hear people mention, and I'd like to get your opinion on this, some people think that if you're going to implement communism, it's easier if you have a nation full of highly feminized men because they're not going to put up a fight. Do you think that's part of it as well? I'm just curious what your opinion is, because I've heard that thrown out there.
I don't know what the cultural overlords are gearing us toward precisely, but I definitely know that our society and culture rips the manhood right out of boys. It takes the nobility from them. It takes the masculine wiring from them. It tells them that they are toxic, as you alluded to earlier. And so whatever ill and foul purposes others are trying to perpetrate right now in 2023, and I'm guessing there are many, it is absolutely the case that what happens when you have strong men, by the grace of God, is that evil is stubbornly, steadfastly, and unflinchingly opposed. And that is what we desperately need. We need men who stand against evil and stand for what is good. And that ultimately takes you right up to the image of Jesus Christ himself, who stands against the evil all around him and stands for what is good and makes blood atonement for sin. And so ultimately, the war on men, this book we're talking about, points us to Jesus. And Jesus points us not to be accepted by the culture, not to be praised and adored and celebrated on social media, but to be a witness for God, and if necessary, even to be hated for the cause of the truth.
When you look at what's happening in society, we have this thing called cancel culture. And when someone speaks out publicly, the way you're doing right now, the way you're bravely doing right now, that person normally has to pay a price. So it would stand to reason that you need strength from God to have the courage to stand up against this nonsense. Because, I mean, I'm 60 years old, Owen, and if you'd have told me when I was a much younger man, maybe a man in grade school or high school or whatever, that one day we would be debating whether or not drag queens should be placed into kindergarten classrooms, whether or not there should be feminine care products put in boys' bathrooms, whether or not men should be allowed, and these aren't, post-op trans people,
right?
Whether men should be able to just wake up one day and say, I identify as a woman. Yeah, you know what? I think I'm going to compete in that female bench press contest next week. I just, I mean, it's crazy. I mean, it is lunacy.
Yes.
And yet we're having these debates publicly like there's even anything to be debated. How did we get to this point?
Yeah, I have just about 5 minutes here. I think we've just got to recognize that feminism has wreaked havoc on our culture, and it's sold women a lie. It's told them that their value, by the way, is defined in terms of a paycheck and an office. And that is not at all true, just in terms of the human person. There are so many things we bring to the table as men and women alike that aren't worth a salary and that don't draw applause and magazine covers. But they matter tremendously, like loving a child and training a child up in the ways of God. So we've just got to know that our society is lying to us. We've got to know that we live now in an empire of lies. and what strong men have to model. And what I call for in this book, The War on Men, is for men to stand up, and in particular, by the way, Christian men, because I am so thankful for seeing Jordan Peterson and Tucker Carlson stand up and call out a lot of the madness that you just quickly described. But actually, Christian men need to be very much at the forefront of this. And we need to say something like this: there is no man who should ever go into the restroom or the changing room of girls or women. The fact that this has happened on anyone's watch, any man's watch, is a sign of just how weak and soft and indoctrinated men are today. So the response to that is not to go kamikaze and lose all self-control. The response to that is to be very disciplined and very controlled, like a true warrior. A true warrior is not a loose cannon. True warrior is strength under discipline, and then fight for what is good and oppose what is evil. That's what we need men to do, and that's what we need Christian men to do. And yes, it does require absolutely putting everything on the line, but it's kind of like that online social media meme. You have one job. I would like for men, I would pray men will think of themselves not as having all sorts of jobs, including to be liked and praised, but to see themselves as having the job of standing up on behalf of women and children and protecting them however they can.
One last question. It's a very important one. Owen, where can people buy the book, The War on Men, Why Society Hates Them and Why We Need Them?
The question that warms an author's heart. Thank you. I appreciate the great questions. Amazon is, a great place to go. Not an uncomplicated buy or purchase for some of us, but still a good place to go. It helps drive, news of the book and all that. So Amazon has the book, The War on Men. I have, by the way, a similar book, Christianity and Wokeness, that makes some similar points. So yeah, that's a great place to go. My Twitter is at OSTRACHAN as well.
Very good. Owen, I want to thank you for being here today. I'm about a third of the way into the book. I do plan to finish it because it's a great book, very different than any other books that have been written on the subject. And let's hope a lot of people read it and a lot of people take its message to heart.
Thank you, Mark. Appreciate it very much.
Have a great rest of your day, sir.
You too, friend. Bye.
Bye-bye. And I want to thank everybody for being here today and remind you that if you'd like to subscribe to our free newsletter, just text the word T-E-A, as in taxed enough already, to 44144. Once again, that's T-E-A to 44144.